What is that there? That's a hollow. What the hell is that? No, tango. Tango. There's kind of light there now. Roger, we got it. We've marked it. Lose communication. Bravo Tango. Bravo Tango. Select Jezebel. Jezebel.
The views presented on Occult Arcade are not a substitute for professional psychiatric advice and should not be taken as such. The content presented is intended to inspire thought and discussion about philosophy and the world as many believe it really is. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey guys, it's me. I'm back from an exciting weekend at the Tattoo Convention Carnival of Ink in Columbia, Missouri, hosted by JBE Entertainment. I got my lip pierced. I'm going to show you all about it while we talk about Isaac Newton. Apparently that guy was into some pretty sweet-ass occult stuff, so let's talk about that for just a second here. Hello, everybody. It's me. It's Donnie. I'm back. I'm here. And for some reason, there's some kind of a little title bar. Oh, I see what that is. All right. And I'm back from the Carnival of Ink. I know I didn't stream all weekend, and I'm sure you guys even noticed. But I'm back, and now we're talking about Isaac Newton. Apparently this dude was not only a brilliant mathematician, debatably, but he was also into the occult. He was into all kinds of cool esoteric philosophies and different things like that. So we're going to touch on some of those things and more. And you can see my lip get swollen because I got it pierced. Actually, I got it pierced twice this weekend. That was kind of an insane thing. I've got my cold brew coffee right here. I made my own creamer. It's delicious. And I don't know. I guess let's get started. Now, here. This is Isaac Newton right there. There's this video that I found. It's like an Isaac Newton documentary. And
in 1936,
yeah, got my lip pierced. Woo! So it's talking about Isaac Newton and about how he's, you know, whatever. You guys can come in and watch this on your own time. But I do got a little bit of something that I can do right now. Hold on, I got a cough. All right, I did it. Hey, Synapses, by the way, I'm super glad that you made it. I'm talking about Isaac Newton. Did you know that Isaac Newton was into weird occult stuff? I don't want to say really weird, but, you know, what normal people around his time would have considered weird. It's really good coffee. Let me see. Do I have... I think I've got like an internet screen. Okay, yeah, I can do this. I can teleport into the internet. And try to bring this up here. Maybe we can... Beyond his name and theory of gravity, I don't know that much about him. Well, you're going to learn today. You're going to learn about this guy who they say invented gravity. Before Isaac Newton, everybody was just floating around above the ground. Some people say it was a good thing. Some people say Isaac Newton was completely off base, should never have created gravity. That's up for debate. But today, I'm going to try to find my internet screen. All right, I think I found it. Boom. All right, here we go. Isaac Newton. Why isn't it? You know, sometimes you just, for some reason, I I don't know why it's doing this. Sometimes you feel like a nut and sometimes you don't. That's almond joy. It has nothing to do with anything we're talking about today. I'm just trying to buy a little bit of time so I can... Gravity is just sound. Gravity doesn't even exist. Oh, there we go. Oh, crap. I figured it out. This is a dynamic screen. Okay, so we're going to stretch to the screen. Here we go. We're going to probably a smarter idea to go something like that. All right. So this is Isaac Newton. We're just going to do this, okay, guys? This is Isaac Newton. This is this shit from fucking the internet. Okay, so I'm willing to talk about gravity's effects from sound. All right, here, let's get back to this screen over here because we need to talk about this, okay? Gravity's effects from sound. What kind of effects are you talking about? Because I've heard all kinds of things about cymatics and different things where you can levitate. You know, it's all due to frequencies. Sound's just a frequency. Particle resonance. You know, that was technology that Tesla was into. Things like that. That's a good coffee. Okay. So, Isaac Newton supposedly the moon has gravity, but there's no atmosphere to carry sound waves. Who knows? Where did my internet screen go? Oh, boom. There we are. All right, so I wonder if I can just whatever. English physicist and mathematician Isaac Newton produced many works that would now be classified as occult studies. These works explored chronology, alchemy, and biblical interpretation, especially of the apocalypse. Newton's scientific work may have been of lesser personal importance to him, as he placed emphasis on rediscovering the occult wisdom of the ancients. In this sense, some historians, including the economist John Maynard Keynes, believe that any reference to a Newtonian worldview as being purely mechanical in nature is somewhat inaccurate. Historical research on Newton's occult studies in relation to his science have also been used to challenge the disenchantment narrative within critical theory. I have no idea what that last part's supposed to even mean. Apparently, you know, we can talk about the occult studies of Isaac Newton, but sound waves on the moon, gravity, this comment section is hopping. There's something crazy going on over there. Well, Isaac Newton, from what it's happening with his journals, somebody bought his journals a while back, and when they went through them, they noticed that he was into a little bit more than just mathematician stuff. You know what I mean? There was occultist stuff in there. So he was into alchemy, different things like that. This is talking a little bit about his alchemical research. Much of what is known as Isaac Newton's occult studies can largely be attributed to his study of alchemy. Newton was deeply interested in all forms of natural sciences and material science, an interest which would ultimately lead to some of his better-known contributions to science. During Newton's lifetime, the study of chemistry was still in its infancy. Why can't I read? So many of his experimental studies used esoteric language and vague terminology more typically associated with alchemy and occultism. Basically, his books are kind of veiled and kind of floofy language, so you can't really tell what he's saying unless you know what he's saying. Much of Newton's writing on alchemy may have been lost in a fire in his laboratory, so the true extent of his work in this area may have been larger than it's currently known. Newton also suffered a nervous breakdown during his period of alchemical work, possibly due to some form of chemical poisoning, possibly from mercury, lead, or some other substance. So some people believe that Isaac Newton might have had a mental breakdown due to his study of alchemy, but it has nothing to do with his psyche breaking down. It was really just chemical poisoning, maybe some kind of lead or mercury, some kind of heavy metal, I think that they say. Right now I'm drinking the heck out of some of this coffee, though. So what do you guys think? Oh, yeah, playing around with mercury might do that. Mercury is a very volatile substance. It'll effing kill you. Oh no, I got whipped cream on my face. So, Newton's writings apparently suggest that one of the main goals of his alchemy may have been the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone, a material to turn base metals into gold. Now, I'm all about the Philosopher's Stone. You know what I'm saying? I've got the Philosopher's Stone on my arm here. You can't really... There we go. You can see that now. There it is. It's not a Harry Potter tattoo. I think that, they had to have, because the information survived. Somebody figured it out. But during his time, I have no clue. That's a good idea. When did technology become existing? When did somebody invent the technology to be able to take care of all of this and the knowledge of mercury and mercury poisoning and how to properly handle mercury? How do you do that? How do you figure that stuff out during a time wherever most people think that there's evil spirits in your blood making you sick? Some practices of alchemy were banned in England during Newton's lifetime. That's what it says here, at least. Due in part to unscrupulous, what does this say? Unscrupulous practitioners who would often promise wealthy benefactors unrealistic results in an attempt to swindle them. The English crown, also fearing the potential devaluation of gold should the Philosopher's Stone actually be discovered, made penalties for alchemy very severe. In some cases, the punishment for unsanctioned alchemy would include the public hanging of an offender in a gilded scaffold while adorned with tinsel and other unspecified items. So they would kind of adorn people with, a bunch of gold and stuff, and then basically hang them like, hey, this is what alchemists get, that's like the witches' burnings, they hung the alchemists. It's kind of the same thing. So, due to the threat of punishment and the potential scrutiny he feared for his peers within the scientific community, Newton may have deliberately left his work on alchemical subjects unpublished. Well, I would say so if they're hanging people in the middle of the square. What's on at the Christians doing the persecuting? Many of the documents... Oh, wait a second. Hold on a minute. I forgot. I lost my spot here. Wasn't on at the Christians during the press. I don't know. In 1936, a collection of Isaac Newton's unpublished works were auctioned by Sotheby's on behalf of Gerard Wallop, 9th Earl of Portsmouth. Yes, my name's Gerard Wallop, 9th Earl of Portsmouth. These are my alchemical drawings from Isaac Newton. Want to see my weird mold? That's what I imagine he would say. Who had inherited them from Newton's great niece, known as the Portsmouth Papers. The material consisted of 329 lots of Newton's manuscripts. Can you guys imagine that? How much? Okay. Man, I don't like looking over on this other screen here. I'm just going to have to... Alright, I can do this. Oh, it changed it. It's fine. I just got to get the... You know, I know it's kind of funny, but if I just get the resolution right, I can just kind of make it enormous here. My internet screen. I'm rich, bitch. Isaac Newton did have a lot of questions about his reality. But could you imagine being as intelligent as Isaac Newton was back then and not having anybody to be able to relate to? That would suck so fucking bad. Like, who did he have to talk to? Like, who were his peers? You know what I mean? Whenever you're somebody like Isaac Newton, who are your peers? Do you even have any? All right, so Newton's writings suggest that one of the main goals of his alchemy may have been the... What the hell just happened? Probably had to do everything in secret. He did have to do everything in secret, actually. He was... that's why it's all in these notebooks. You know what I mean? That's why it's not published. I guess that's really kind of what they meant by, his work went unpublished, is that he did it in secret and didn't really talk to anybody about it. And he really couldn't, they were killing people for this back then. This isn't something that you could just be like, oh, my bad, guys. I'm sorry for learning about this stuff. I'm sorry for learning. You know what I mean? I guess I'll just get hung by this weird scaffolding. Newton's writings suggest that one of the main goals of his alchemy may have been the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone, a material believed to turn base metals into gold, and perhaps to a lesser extent the discovery of the highly coveted elixir of life. So as far as this article is saying, oh man, all of them that they could find. Okay, Synapses asks, I wonder how many geniuses that could have altered our reality today were killed off for thinking outside the box. There were many of them, okay, and pretty much every single one of them that is a real threat gets eliminated. If you look throughout history, it's full of people getting eliminated one after another for trying to wake people up. It's kind of like the story of the Matrix, which is kind of weird. Neo, they know he's coming, and so they're looking for him. And they've got the agents all are looking for him. That's kind of their whole goal, and that's what they do. It's kind of amazing. Newton's pretty crazy. I couldn't imagine, Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, all of these guys who, we only know about them because they had such an impact on art and technology and sciences. But really what they did was it's kind of funny. These guys are all avid journalers. They write journals. They keep a book. And write details down and things. It's kind of amazing that it's kind of amazing how detailed a lot of these journals are. If you look at a lot of Leonardo da Vinci's journals, they've got some anatomical drawings that are just, still to this day unmatched because of their complexity and detail and just beauty and form. And it was just amazing that this is his personal journal. This is something he's making for himself. And, later on they got published, but back then this is just something he was using for himself. He was digging these bodies up and drawing this stuff. And Isaac Newton is kind of the same way. He was studying these weird esoteric things. He was studying these concepts that are really kind of, they could get him killed back then, but he had an obligation to the advancement of knowledge. He had this, I guess, a morbid curiosity of the function and form of the of the underlying structure of nature. I mean, really, that's what mathematics is kind of the explanation of the underlying structure of nature. And, it's been said, especially recently, that, the whole structure of reality is based on numbers itself. And, what is a number except for a description of something? So it's almost like an amazing thought when you think about the nature of that. And, you kind of have to think that Isaac Newton might have thought some of these thoughts too. Whenever he was looking for the Philosopher's Stone, which is if you're not familiar with the Philosopher's Stone, it's actually a substance that is created whenever you go through the alchemical process and you put the right substances through the process. What comes out the other side is this stone that can transform anything that comes into contact with it into gold. So it's one of the most amazing things. And it's the secret to creating gold. Having unlimited wealth. What else do they say? You'll live forever, immortality. And that's why, they say Isaac Newton was looking for the elixir of life and all that. Newton reportedly believed that a Diana's tree, an alchemical demonstration producing a dendritic growth of silver from solution, was evidence of that metals possessed a sort of life. Okay, I kind of want to show you guys this, okay? Hey, you know what? Synapses, if you could really use one of those Philosopher's Stones, we could show you how to do that. Because the Philosopher's Stone's real. It's not a fake thing. Like, this is actually a real thing. It's just not what you think it is. It's a little bit different. But I was going to show you guys this dendritic growth that they were talking about, where Isaac Newton, he thought that this was the proof that there was life inside of crystals and minerals and things like that. So I'm going to try to look for that here. I have to find a Diana's tree. Okay, that's what it's called. Forgot what it was called for a second. Diana's tree alchemy. So this is from and I don't claim any copyright to this. This is actually just because we're hanging out and having fun here. I'm going to put this into the arcade so y'all can watch it, but it might take me a second. All right, so I have this little bit of information here. All right, this is the Tree of Diana. And okay, this is copyright William Newman. A crystalline growth emerges from a globular amalgam of silver and mercury in a solution of silver and mercury dissolved in nitric acid. So this is what Isaac Newton said that was kind of evidence that metals possessed a sort of life. Some practices of alchemy were banned in England during Newton's lifetime due to unscrupulous practitioners. Blah, 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 blah. We talked about that. Oh, okay. In 1936, a collection of Isaac Newton's unpublished works were auctioned. It's the Portsmouth Papers. We talked about that a little bit earlier. At the time of Newton's death, this material was considered unfit to publish by Newton's estate and consequently fell into obscurity until their somewhat sensational reemergence in 1936. At the auction, many of these documents, that was it. That was that growth. Gallium is a metal that eats all other metals, right? Yeah, I think so. That's right. Yeah, gallium can eat other metals. Let's try to look for that. It's kind of weird. So, there it is. That gallium information. Here, I'm going to pause the arcade. Bloom. Okay. Hey, how's it going? Jimmy the Hot Pocket is now hosting. Jimmy the Hot Pocket, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your presence. At the auction, many of these documents, along with Newton's death mask, were purchased by economist John Maynard Keynes, who throughout his life collected many of Newton's alchemical writings. Much of the Keynes collection later passed to eccentric documenter Abraham Yehuda, who himself a vigorous collector of Isaac Newton's original manuscripts. So Abraham Yehuda got the stuff from Keynes, and many of the documents collected by Keynes and Yehuda are now at the Jewish National and University Library in Jerusalem. So all of Isaac Newton's, all of his knowledge has been collected and put into a museum over there in Jerusalem. In recent years, several projects have begun to gather, catalog, and transcribe the fragmented collection of Newton's work on alchemical subjects and make them freely available for online access. So hopefully they get that done, and so we'll be able to go online and actually read for ourselves what was going on with Isaac Newton. Two of these are the Chemistry of Isaac Newton Project, supported by the U.S. National Science Foundation, and the Newton Project, supported by the UK Arts and Humanities Research Board. In addition, the Jewish National and University Library has published a number of high-quality scanned images of various Newton documents. So I wonder if we can find that. Sorry, I got late shift, so I won't be home 4 hours from now. Just wanted to let you know the power of lurk is great, Donnie-san. Later. Jimmy the Hot Pocket, you're amazing. I think that you're great. I hope that you have a wonderful time at work, and I hope that it goes really quickly for you. You're the man, bro. You are the man. The Philosopher's Stone. So, of the materials sold during the 1936 Sotheby's auction, several documents indicate an interest by Newton in the procurement or development of the Philosopher's Stone. Most notably are documents entitled Artephius and His Secret Book, followed by the Epistle of John Pontanus, wherein he beareth witness of the book of Artephius. These are themselves a collection of excerpts from another work entitled Nicolas Flamel, his exposition of the hieroglyphical figures which he caused to be painted upon an arch in St. Innocent's churchyard in Paris, together with the secret book of Artephius and the epistle of John Pontius, containing both the theories and practice of the Philosopher's Stone. That's pretty cool. Kind of spelled weird. This work may have also been referenced by Newton in its Latin version, found in Lazarus Zettner's Theatrium Chemicum, so I guess chemical theater or something, a volume often associated with the Turba Philosophorum and other early European alchemical manuscripts. Nicolas Flamel, one subject of the aforementioned work, was a notable, though mysterious figure, often associated with the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone. I need to have a show about Nicolas Flamel himself. He was super interesting. Him and his wife, it is said, actually did discover the Philosopher's Stone, and they became immortal, they became rich, and they disappeared, and nobody knows where they went. But they say that he's around and she's around, and that they're still out there somewhere. Nicolas Flamel, one subject of the aforementioned work, was a notable though mysterious figure often associated with the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone, hieroglyphical figures, early forms of tarot and occultism. Artephius and his secret book were also the subjects of interest in the 17th century alchemists. Also in the 1936 auction of Newton's collection was the Epitome of the Treasure of Health, written by Eduardius Generosus Angelicus Innominatus, who lived Anno Domini 1562. That is a book with a long title. That's a 28-page treatise on the Philosopher's Stone. 24 of those pages are actually in the title itself. The animal or angelical stone. So the Philosopher's Stone is something that they call the angelical stone. It's a concept in alchemy. According to Elias Ashmole, the stone was the goal above all goals for the alchemist. Well, that's pretty interesting. The perspective stone was, or magical stone of Moses, and the vegetable, or the growing stone. So they call it all of these things: the animal, the angelical stone, the perspective stone, the magical stone of Moses, the vegetable. I don't know why they call it the vegetable. That doesn't really make sense. The growing stone. I can see why it's called the growing stone, because it teaches you to grow. The vegetable. This is the vegetable of life. I'm going to create the vegetable. I just like saying vegetable, honestly, at this point. In a manuscript he wrote in 1704, in which he describes his attempts to extract scientific information from the Bible, Newton estimated that the world would end no earlier than 2060. So if you guys are worried about it, if you are worried that the world might end, you're safe, at least for a few more years. It won't end until at least 2060. At least until 2060. So, in predicting this, said, this I mention not to assert when the time of the end shall be, but to put a stop to the rash conjectures of fanciful men who are frequently predicting the end, and by doing so bring the sacred prophecies into discredit as often as their predictions fail. So really, Newton was saying, like, it's not going to end until at least 2060, so stop making all these claims, because it's not happening now. It's not going to happen now. In some of his journals, Newton studied and wrote extensively on the Temple of Solomon, dedicating an entire chapter of the Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms amended to his observations regarding the temple. Newton's primary source for information was the description of the structure given within 1 Kings of the Hebrew Bible, which he translated himself from Hebrew. So Isaac Newton translated this stuff from Hebrew to English, I'm guessing, himself. In addition to scripture, Newton also relied on various ancient and contemporary sources while studying the temple. He believed that many ancient sources were endowed with sacred wisdom, and that the proportions of many of their temples were in themselves sacred. This belief would lead Newton to examine many architectural works of Hellenistic Greece, as well as Roman sources, such as Vitruvius, in a search for their occult knowledge. So he kind of got interested in history. He got super interested in Roman and Greek architecture, because he wanted to know, he wanted to know their occult knowledge. That's pretty sweet. This concept also often termed Princeps Sapientia, sacred wisdom, and also the ancient wisdom that was revealed to Adam and Moses directly by God, was a common belief of many scholars during Newton's lifetime. I do wonder how many languages that Isaac Newton was able to speak. That's probably a question that we can answer. I'm going to look that up. How many languages? Well, Isaac Newton knew English, Greek, and Latin. Would you look at that? Yeah, English, Greek, and Latin. Well, and apparently Hebrew, but... It's really interesting to me that he was able to translate Hebrew. Yeah, that's fine. It's really interesting. A more contemporary source for Newton's studies of the temple was Juan Bautista Villalpando. I don't know what... Juan Bautista Villalpando, who just a few decades earlier had published an influential manuscript entitled... Oh my God. Oh, they hate me. Ezekielum Explanations, in which Villalpando comments on the visions of the biblical prophet Ezekiel, including within this work his own interpretations and elaborate reconstructions of Solomon's temple. In its time, Villalpando's work on the temple produced a great deal of interest throughout Europe and had a significant impact on later architects and scholars. As a biblical scholar, Newton was initially interested in the sacred geometry of Solomon's temple, such as golden sections, conic sections, spirals, orthographic projection, and other harmonious constructions. But he also believed that the dimensions and proportions represented more. He noted that the temple's measurements given in the Bible are mathematical problems related to the solutions for, pi? And the volume of a hemisphere. And in a larger sense, they were references to the size of the earth and man's place in proportion to it. So Newton believed that the temple was designed by King Solomon with privileged eyes and divine guidance. To Newton, the geometry of the temple represented more than a mathematical blueprint. It also provided a time frame chronology of Hebrew history. I wonder how he extrapolated that information. It was for this reason that he included a chapter devoted to the temple within the Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended, a section which initially may seem unrelated to the historical nature of the book as a whole. Newton felt that just as the writings of ancient philosophers, scholars, and biblical figures contained within them unknown sacred wisdom, the same was true of their architecture. He believed that these men had hidden knowledge in a complex code of symbolic and mathematical language that, when deciphered, would reveal an unknown knowledge of how nature worked. So he thought that in all of the architecture of these peoples, there was hidden information. In 1675, Newton annotated a copy of Manna, a disquisition of the nature of alchemy, an anonymous treatise which had been given to him by his fellow scholar Ezekiel Foxcroft. In his annotation, Newton reflected upon his reasons for examining Solomon's temple by writing, "This philosophy, both speculative and active, is not only to be found in the volume of nature, but also in the sacred scriptures, as in Genesis, Job, Psalms, Isaiah, and others. In the knowledge of this philosophy, God made Solomon the greatest philosopher in the world." So Isaac Newton was really into this whole Solomonic thing. He believed that King Solomon knew something. Why would one of the greatest minds in history think that at all? During Newton's lifetime, there was great interest in the Temple of Solomon in Europe due to the success of Villalpando's publications and augmented by a vogue for detailed engravings and physical models presented in various galleries for public viewing. In 1628, Judah Leon Templo produced a model of the temple and surrounding Jerusalem, which was popular in its day. Around 1692, Gerhard Schott produced a highly detailed model of the temple for use in an opera in Hamburg, composed by Christian Heinrich Postel. This immense 13-foot high and 80-foot around model was later sold in 1725 and was exhibited in London as early as 1723. And then later it was temporarily installed at the London Royal Exchange from 1729 to 1730, where it could be viewed for half a crown. Isaac Newton's most comprehensive work on the temple, found within the Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended, was published posthumously in 1728, only adding to the public interest in the temple. So that was around Isaac Newton's time. There were people who were, they made a model of the temple. They were hanging out. It was in some plays and different things like that, so that's kind of neat. Newton considered himself to be one of a select group of individuals who were specifically chosen by God for the task of understanding biblical scripture. So Isaac Newton was one of those people who's like, I am divinely, I've got divine knowledge on how to understand the Bible. I don't doubt that he would feel that way, or I understand why he would feel that way, because he had a mind that worked better than these other people. He probably understood things that he was probably the smartest person that he knew, so how would you ever think that you were the same as everybody else? He was a strong believer in prophetic interpretation of the Bible, and like many of his contemporaries in Protestant England, he developed a strong affinity and deep admiration for the teachings and works of Joseph Mead. Although he never wrote a cohesive body of work on prophecy, Newton's belief led him to write several treatises on the subject, including an unpublished guide for prophetic interpretation entitled Rules for Interpreting the Words and Language in Scripture. In this manuscript, he details the necessary requirements for what he considered to be the proper interpretation of the Bible, which is kind of freaking hilarious. Of course, everybody thinks that their interpretation of the Bible is going to be the interpretation of the Bible. Isn't that kind of the whole point of it all? In addition, Newton would spend much of his life seeking and revealing what could be considered a Bible code. Now, this is something I used to get really interested in, the Bible code. Have you ever heard of the Bible code before? Bible code is the concept that there's a hidden code within the Bible that if you skip a certain amount of letters each time, then the letters that remain spell something. And that information is a code to give you, insight into the future or whatever. I have the computer code translated from ancient Hebrew version of the Bible. Oh, that's pretty cool. I have this Bible that I got from a hotel for free. It's from the Gideons, actually. This is the Gideons Bible. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty good Bible, honestly. I'm glad that they gave that to me. He placed a great deal of emphasis on the interpretation of the book of Revelation, writing generously upon this book and authoring several manuscripts detailing his interpretations. Unlike a prophet in the true sense of the word, Newton relied upon existing scripture to prophesy for him, believing his interpretations would set the record straight in the face of what he considered to be so little understood. In 1754, 27 years after his death, Isaac Newton's treatise, An Historical Account of Two Notable Corruptions of Scripture, would be published, and although it doesn't argue any prophetic meaning, it does exemplify what Newton considered to be just one popular misunderstanding on Scripture. Although Newton's approach to these studies could not be considered a scientific approach, he did write as if his findings were the result of evidence-based research. So he doesn't really prove anything, but he's like, this is why it is what it is. I can relate to the kind of mentality that births that would be required for that to be a real thing. In late February and early March 2003, a large amount of media attention circulated around the globe regarding largely unknown and unpublished documents, evidently written by Isaac Newton, indicating that he believed the world would end no earlier than 2060. The story garnered vast amounts of public interest and found its way into the front pages of several widely distributed newspapers, including the UK's Daily Telegraph, Canada's National Post, Israel's Ma'ariv, and Yedot Ahronot, I don't know how to pronounce that, and also featured in an article on the scientific journal Canadian Journal of History. Television and internet stories in the following weeks heightened the exposure and ultimately would include the production of several documentary films focused on the topic of the 2060 prediction and some of Newton's lesser-known beliefs and practices. The two documents detailing this prediction are currently housed within the Jewish National and University Library in Jerusalem. Both were believed to be written toward the end of Newton's life, circa 1705, a time frame most notably established by the use of the full title of Sir Isaac Newton within portions of the documents. These documents do not appear to have been written in the intention of publication, and Newton expressed a strong personal dislike for individuals who provided specific dates for the apocalypse purely for sensational value. Furthermore, he at no time provided a specific date for the end of the world in either of these documents. To understand the reasoning behind the 2060 prediction and understanding of Newton's theological beliefs should be taken into account. particularly his apparent anti-Trinitarian beliefs and his Protestant views on the papacy. Both of these lay essential to his calculations, which ultimately would provide the 2060 time frame. And you can see Isaac Newton's religious views for more details. The first document, part of the Yehuda collection, is a small letter slip on the back of which is written haphazardly in Newton's hand. Prop 1, the 2300 prophetic days did not commence before the rise of the little horn of the goat. Those days did not commence after the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Romans. The times and a half, blah, blah, blah. This is nuts, okay? So the second reference to the 26th prediction can be found in a folio in which Newton writes, So then the time times and half a time are 40. Oh my God, I'm not reading that. Sorry, Isaac Newton, but you write in weird. So the time times and a half a time are 42 months or 1260 days or 3 years and a half, reckoning 12 months to a year and 30 days to a month, and it was done on the calendar of the primitive year and the days of short blah blah blah. Anyway, he finds out that the world's going to end no earlier than the year 2060. So, he could put to rest for a lot of people that the world was going to end soon or something like that. Newton may not have been referring to the post-2060 event as a destructive act resulting in the annihilation of the globe and its inhabitants, but rather one in which he believed the world as he saw it was to be replaced with a new one based on a transition to an era of divinely inspired peace. In Christian and Islamic theology, this concept is often referred to as the second coming of Jesus Christ and the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. In a separate manuscript, Isaac Newton paraphrases Revelation 21 and 22 and relates the post-2060 events by writing, "A new heaven and a new earth and a new Jerusalem comes down from heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. The marriage supper. God dwells with men, wipes away all the tears from their eyes, and gives them of the fountain of living water, and creates all things new, saying, 'It is done.' The glory and felicity of the New Jerusalem is represented by a building of gold and gems, enlightened by the glory of God and the Lamb, and watered by the river on paradise, from the banks of which grows the tree of life. Into this city the kings of the earth do bring their glory, and all of the nations and the saints reign forever and ever." Isaac Newton wrote extensively on the historical topic of chronology as well. In 1728, the Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms amended an approximately 87,000-word composition that details the rise and history of various ancient kingdoms was published. The publication date of this work occurred after his death, although the majority of it had been reviewed for publication by Newton himself shortly before he died. As such, this work represents one of his last known personally reviewed publications. Sometime around 1701, he also produced a 30-page unpublished treatise entitled The Original of Monarchies, detailing the rise of several monarchs throughout the antiquity and tracing them back to the biblical figure of Noah. So he was really working a whole lot to trace a lot of things back to a biblical standpoint. You realize that he was willing to learn about things he wasn't supposed to know about, but he definitely did have some beliefs in that, and he was living within a paradigm and a framework himself. Newton's chronological writing is Eurocentric, with the earliest records focusing on Greece, Anatolia, Egypt, and the Levant. Many of Newton's dates do not correlate with current historical knowledge. While Newton mentions several prehistorical events found within the Bible, the oldest actual historic date he provides is 1125 BC. In this entry, he mentions Nephrys, a ruler over Upper Egypt for the territories of Syene to Heliopolis, and his successor, Misfragmathosis. I like that name, Misfragmathosis. However, during 1125 BC, the pharaoh of Egypt is now understood to be Ramses IX. Although some of the dates Newton provides for various events are accurate by 17th century standards, archaeology as a form of modern science did not exist in Newton's time. In fact, the majority of the conclusionary dates which Newton cites are based on the works of Herodotus, Pliny, Plutarch, Homer, and various other classical historians, authors, and poets, themselves often citing secondary sources and oral records of uncertain date. So Newton's approach to chronology was focused on gathering historical information from various sources found throughout antiquity and cataloging them according to their appropriate date by his contemporary understanding, standards, and available source material. So it wasn't really as scientific as it could have been. It was more of, this is the best I've got, and let's see exactly what I can do with it. Now, as far as Newton's Atlantis, found within the Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended, are several passages that directly mention the land of Atlantis. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, Isaac Newton was into Atlantis. I bet you didn't know that. The first such passage is part of his short chronicle, which indicates his belief that Homer's Ulysses left the land of Ogygia in 896 BC. In Greek mythology, Ogygia was the home to Calypso, the daughter of Atlas, after whom Atlantis was named. And actually a lot of our modern history is just word of mouth, and worse than that. And I'll have a show on that sometime pretty soon as well. Some scholars have suggested that Ogygia and Atlantis are locationally connected or possibly the same island. From his writings, it appears Newton may have shared this belief. Newton also lists Cadus or Cales as the possible candidates for Ogygia, although he doesn't cite his reasons for believing so. Oh, hi. And here we go. Isaac Newton's often been associated with various secret societies and fraternal orders throughout history. Due to the secretive nature of such organizations, lack of supported publicized material, and dubious motives for claiming Newton's participation in these groups, it's really difficult to establish his actual membership in any specific organization. In particular, Jewish Isaac Newton is believed to be a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, since he was one of the 1717 founders of the Lodge of England, and by virtue of the number of Masonic buildings have been dedicated in his honor. So he was definitely a Freemason. Newton's theological writings has substantially been kept secret for 280 years and first published only in 2007. After his death, the Royal Society refused to conserve them and give back to the Newton's family, recommending not to publish and not to talk about that to anyone. The main exception was the book Observation upon the Prophecies of Daniel and the Apocalypse of St. John, first published in 1733 at London and Dublin and by Benjamin Smith Barton, nephew of Barnabas, the stepfather of Newton. 4 years later, the book was translated in Latin by W. Sweeterman and followed by the 12th edition until 1922. The Isaac Newtoni Opera Omnia, edited by Samuel Horsley in 1779 to 1785, didn't mention Newton's religious writings, while the scientist Sir David Brewster also read them and mentioned a very limited number in his biography of Newton. Sir John Conduit, spouse of Catherine Barton, a niece of Newton, passed to manuscripts to his descendants, the Count of Portsmouth, since in 1875 the entire collection was donated to the University of Cambridge, that in 1888 published in London a book entitled A Catalogue of the Portsmouth Collection of Books and Papers written or belonging to Sir Isaac Newton. Many of the writings weren't again accepted by the Cambridge University and the British Museum, and they were given back to Newton's family. In the 1936 auction by Sotheby's, some writings were purchased by the economist Lord Keynes and then donated to the University Library. The King's and the Trinity College religious writings were purchased by A.S. Yehuda, who immigrated in the U.S. in 1940, tried to donate to the University Harvard, Yale, and Princeton that didn't accept. Finally, they were placed to the University of Jerusalem, translated and published in a minimal part by F.E. Manuel till the 2007 unveiling. So people do not want to touch these. You know, they've been going on and on, passing the buck on these documents, and they finally were documented. Regardless of his own membership status, Newton was a known associate of many individuals who themselves have often been labeled as members of various esoteric groups. It's unclear if these associations were a result of his being a well-established and prominently publicized scholar, an early member and sitting president of the Royal Society, a prominent figure of the state and master of the mint, a recognized knight, or if Newton actually sought active membership within these esoteric organizations himself. Considering the nature and legality of alchemical practices during his lifetime, as well as his possession of various materials and manuscripts pertaining to alchemical research, Newton may very well have been a member of a group of like-minded thinkers and colleagues. The organized level of this group, if in fact any existed, the level of their secrecy, and as well as the level of depth of Newton's involvement within them remains unclear. Although Newton was largely considered a reclusive personality and not prone to socializing, during his lifetime being a member of societies or clubs was a very popular form of interpersonal networking. Considering his esteemed social status, it's probable that Newton would have had at least some contact with some groups of various levels. He is most certainly a member of the Royal Society of London for the improvement of natural knowledge and the Spalding Gentlemen's Society. However, those are considered learned societies, not esoteric societies. Newton's membership status within any particular secret society remains verifiably elusive and largely speculative. However, it still lends to popular sensationalism. People just love to claim that Newton was a part of some crazy groups. Perhaps the movement which most influenced Isaac Newton was Rosicrucianism. Although the Rosicrucian movement had caused a great deal of excitement within Europe's scholarly community during the 17th century, by the time Newton had reached maturity, the movement had become less sensationalized. However, the Rosicrucian movement still would have had a profound influence on Newton, particularly in regard to his alchemical work and philosophical thought. The Rosicrucian belief in being specifically chosen for the ability to communicate with angels or spirits echoed in Newton's prophetic beliefs. Additionally, the Rosicrucians proclaimed to have the ability to live forever through the use of their elixir vitae, and the ability to produce limitless amounts of time and gold from the use of the Philosopher's Stone, which they claimed to have in their possession. Like Newton, the Rosicrucians were deeply religious, avowedly Christian, anti-Catholic, and highly politicized. Isaac Newton would have a deep interest in not just their alchemical pursuits, but also their belief in esoteric truths of the ancient past and the belief in enlightened individuals with the ability to gain insight into nature, the physical universe, and the spiritual realm. At the time of his death, Isaac Newton had 169 books on the topic of alchemy in his personal library. It's believed to have considerably more books on this topic during his Cambridge years, though he may have sold them before moving to London in 1696. For its time, his was considered one of the finest alchemical libraries in the world. In his library, Newton left behind a heavily annotated personal copy of The Fame and Confession of the Fraternity, R.C., by Thomas Vaughan, which represents an English translation of the Rosicrucian Manifestos. Newton also possessed copies of Themis Aurea and Symbolia Aurea Mensae Duodecim by the learned alchemist Michael Meyer, both of which are significant early books about the Rosicrucian movement. These books were also extensively annotated by Newton. Newton's ownership of these materials by no means denotes membership with any early Rosicrucian order. Furthermore, considering that his personal alchemical investigations were focused upon discovering materials which the Rosicrucians professed to already be in possession of long before he was born, it would seem to come to exclude Newton from their membership. However, in religious terms, the fact that a saint might have found God would not preclude others from the search. That's quite the opposite. During the ancient and mystical order Rosicrucians have always claimed Newton as a frater. During his own life, Newton was openly accused of being a Rosicrucian, as were many of the members of the Royal Society. Although it's not known for sure if Isaac Newton was in fact a Rosicrucian, he never publicly identified himself as one. From his writings, it does appear that he might have shared their sentiments and beliefs. So what do you think about Isaac Newton? How do you feel about the way that he thought? You know, do you think that he was more of a mathematical thinker? Do you think that he was more of a spiritualist? From the things that we've learned today about Isaac Newton, has it changed the way that you view Isaac Newton? I want to know all about that. Tell me in the comment section. I'm going to go over here. Oh, look, there's a dog behind me. We're going to go and we can watch. Oh, I think I'm stuck. I wonder why I can't jump. That's odd. I'm going to go into fly mode and just fly out of here. Hey. Absolutely. You know, Isaac Newton, he's... I don't know if you have Anarchy Arcade on Steam, but if you do, you can come in and watch this. You can watch this documentary right here. This is a documentary about Isaac Newton.
In 1936, a huge collection of scientific documents and personal papers was put up for auction at Sotheby's.
And this is what we were talking about. Maynard James Keenan from Tool purchased a whole bunch. I'm just kidding. It wasn't really him. It was John Maynard Keynes.
And a large number of them were bought by the famous British economist John Maynard Keynes. Many were written in secret code.
Oh, thanks, Synapses. Aw, man. I appreciate that.
He hoped they would reveal the private thoughts of the man who invented a new branch of math called calculus, figured out the composition of light.
He created
and
calculus.
the laws of gravity and motion, which govern the universe.
He has kind of a giant head. Have you noticed he has just like a big head? Kind of looks like Dave Mustaine a little bit.
The Newtonian age, and it was premised on the concept that everything virtually in the universe was amenable to scientific understanding.
Hey, here's a shout out to the band on my shirt. It's Luna J from Springfield, Missouri. So just shout out to that. I look like that Brule guy. Look at all those biddies you gave me, man. Synapses, you are amazing. Oh man.
And devoted to the occult.
He is known today.
So come on in and watch this video. I'm not gonna watch the whole thing because of copyrights and all that jazz. But I'm just going over right now. There's a lot of different videos and stuff that you can watch in this room. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much for helping me hang out, tuning in, and I will go ahead and see you guys later. I guess I'm gonna cut to the credits now. I guess I better put on some music or something. That would be kind of odd if I didn't. You know what I mean? I don't even know where the music is at this point. What is life? What is life? Here's one. All right. Well, I'm going to get out of here. I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.